go. Hello, I'm Sarah Murphy, the Chair of Sustainable Wales. Welcome to the first in our series of 4 webinars this October on the circular economy. The reason we are doing these is that our charity has campaigned for over 20 years for sustainable development and ethical consumerism, and we are very excited about the imminent Welsh Government circular economy strategy and Wales becoming a zero waste nation by 2050. So tonight we wanted to create quite a laid-back space where we can come together from across Wales and build on raising awareness of different aspects of the circular economy, ask questions, share thoughts, share experiences. And we have people here tonight who have been working on the circular economy for decades, and those who may not have heard of the circular economy but are passionate about helping our planet and our communities and the Sustainable Development Goals, which is what means so much to us, the charity. So just to say, there are no daft questions tonight, and we're not going to say, only questions. Comments are great. Sharing your experiences is brilliant, and all very welcome. We're calling these lightning webinars, as they will be no longer than 1 hour and 15 minutes, we promise. And by now, we've probably all between us been to thousands of Zoom calls, so we know the drill. I'll meet everyone. Please post any comments in the chat box as we go along, and if you'd like to then be brought in to speak, then that'll be great. So we're going to have Brian and Bettina speak first, and then I'll open it up to some questions and comments, and then we're going to have Shea and Angelina come in and speak at the end. So let's get started. We thought for our first one, we start off with an easy question, if there's any easy questions when it comes to the circular economy, keeping it nice and simple. Why do we need a circular economy in Wales? And our first speaker is Brian Mayne. So Brian Mayne is a director of HJL, and he's a fellow of both the Royal Society of Arts and the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. He was previously the Regional Director in Wales for Ocado Energy and Environment, and he has extensive experience working within the circular economy, and this has involved business development, providing advice to SMEs and social enterprise. And I'd just like to add as well that Brian has been a wonderful mentor and advisor when it's come to putting these webinars together. So thank you very much, Brian. And over to you for the easy part of this. Why do we need a circular economy in Wales, and what is the circular economy?
So basically, I'm the warm-up artist for the Star Acts, yeah. And in my bio there, I noticed that Sarah didn't mention anything about my IT skills, and now the next 10-15 minutes will show why. So I'm going to have a shot at sharing my screen.
Yeah. One moment. Let's do this. We can do this. We can do this together. There we go. There we go. Brian.
So the next bit is the bit that I struggled with last time, and that's trying to get it to share. So let's hope that works. Does it work? Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Working.
Thank God for that. Well, it's such a relief. I don't feel like doing the presentation now, to be quite honest. Anyhow, so circular economy. So I'm going to try and whip through this, to be quite honest. What my starting point is this, is that I want to remind us that sustainable development is at the heart of whatever we do, and we need to be mindful of that, because whatever way we try to improve our economy, sustainability must be at its heart. And in terms of that, we need to remind ourselves that what sustainability is, and we'll take the Brundtland definition, it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to their own needs. And then that ties in Wales. I'm so proud to come from a nation that has sustainable development at its heart and everything it does in terms of its government. And I speak all over the place in terms of sustainable development, circular economy, and I'm so proud of what we've done in Wales. And the well-being of future generations Act involves everything from housing to roads to our education. And we mustn't forget that. So Whatever I talk about the circular economy, I just hope that you're just mindful of that as I go through it. So the circular economy. So in terms of the circular economy, make, take, and dispose. Absolute madness, frankly, absolute madness if you think about it. So I was having a can of Coke. There are many ways. Sorry, ginger beer. I can't stand Coke, and it's made out of an aluminium can. And you think about this, the resource extraction to waste, and so there we are, a little humble aluminium can. Takes about 4 to 6 tons of bauxite, raw material, to create a ton of aluminium. So we got this out of the ground in the first place. It's normally mined in open cast mines, open cut mines, huge places, dusty, water intensive, normally in tropical or subtropical areas. And we get our aluminium out. Where did we do? Turn it into aluminium sheets, send it off. It gets manufactured into these cans. Now, this is a breathtaking figure. This is 9.5 billion drink cans are produced in the UK. Goodness gracious, that's unbelievable, isn't it? And we only recycle 75%. So remember now, we've extracted the bauxite, turned it into aluminium, produced it into cans, distributed to our shops. We come along, consume it, and nevertheless, 25% of these are thrown away. But there is no away. There's no such thing as away when we say throw away. So these can end up in landfill sites, exactly the same place where we tried to dig them out from a few months prior. It's crazy, isn't it? And then when we start talking about food, then it gets really, it really gets bonkers. And I haven't got time to do that. So we need to think of keeping things circular. We need to say, okay, we're going to produce this. Then in terms of, we have to look at different ways of producing it. Do we have to produce a can? Can we refill something? You know, water, for example, in my little aluminium drinks bottle there. So we need to keep it going round and round and round. That goes for everything we purchase, everything we produce, everything we manufacture, the different materials, keeping it in that loop. Don't forget, there is no waste in nature. Something comes along or eats it or grows from it. So in terms of circularity, stop the linear make, take, and dispose. Start thinking of circular. So how can we make things circular? And the benefits of it. You said, why should we have a circular economy in Wales? Look at these figures, for goodness sake, in terms of employment. We're in a stage now, horrific employment on the horizon, or is facing us now as a result of this pandemic. Here's an opportunity for a green recovery utilising the circular economy. And research by RAP, research by other eminent organisations has identified the amount of jobs that can be recreated. Did you know, for example, in recycling, there's a bit of research that says recycling creates 9 more jobs than landfill or incineration. You know, that's recycling. How many does it get pushed up when you really look at the benefits of reuse and recovery? So apart from job creation, you look at the slide here, in terms of the actual income that can be generated within Wales. So developing the policies and the structure that Welsh Government are doing and organisations are doing, we shall ensure that by keeping products manufacturing in a circular way, we can generate jobs, we can generate income for Wales. And how do we do that? So hopefully you've got an idea now, the circularity things moving around within our economy. We then look at 2 elements for me. One is businesses, looking at hiring or leasing of products instead of purchasing. We're looking at ways of delivering different types of businesses. Businesses have changed so much, you know, in terms of things like Facebook. We have the world's most popular media owner creates no content whatsoever. Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, no real estate. Businesses, systems are changing. We need to start thinking about how businesses can change and provide them with support. And Bettina will no doubt explain some of the types of support that we're providing to these businesses. You know, design, this is one of the areas that are going to be covered later on in one of the webinars. Designing products for longer life, for goodness sake. You know, not that they're building in obsolescence. You know, not building something that we change overnight because it's gone out of fashion. So all of these areas here, looking at how we can share knowledge, all of these will be covered in the following webinars. And all of them are so exciting and provide different opportunities. And social enterprises are at the forefront of delivering some of these new businesses. And for me, I've dumped them all into one. This is one of my faves. This is Tuna in Sweden. This is MacArthur Glen of what we should be looking at in terms of the circular economy. So we got this recycling mall. It sell clothes, furniture, electronic goods. They hold workshops, lectures. They have a cafe so that the surplus food is used. So this is a place that you can go and find out not only about buying products, but how they're being reused, remanufactured. So it has repair cafes, it has sharing organizations. And the killer here, look at this at the bottom line here. In 2015, it had sales of about £250,000. 3 years later, £1 million. So this shows the benefits of the generating income and the different and diverse types of businesses that can be developed. So to deliver a circular economy, we need to have businesses. In terms of a circular economy, we as consumers now need to start thinking. We now need to start thinking about recycling. Yeah, but it's more than recycling. And I get annoyed when people think circular economy is recycling. It's about repair. It's about reuse. It's about reduction in the first place. Why are we buying stuff when we don't need it in the first place? So now I come to my drill. So here's my drill. There was a bit of marketing that was done. We don't need a drill, we need a hole in the wall. And if you think about it, when I do this in conferences, I get people to stand up and say, how many got drilled? About 80% of them. I came across some bonkers statistics here. Okay, I know this is America, but never mind. 20 minutes a drill is used in its lifetime. 20 minutes. So it's taking up time in a garage, I suppose. And then, okay, this is America again. Nearly half of the households in America own one. Half. I've never been to a conference that I've had nowhere around. They normally every about 80%. So if you think about it, I live in a little street, there are 10 houses. So you could presume like 7 of us have got one of these things. We're all using it 20 minutes. Isn't that mad? Why don't we share that? Why don't we set something up that we don't need all these drills, do we? Why? Because we need a hole in the wall. This is such a serious drill. I can turn the lights off, look, and drill holes in the dark. God knows why. I haven't used it to drill a hole in the dark. I'll have to try that out. Anyway, I only came across that quite recently. I was drilling all, so what's that light coming from all the time? Only finds out my drill. But then again, it shows I'm only going to use it for 20 minutes, so why should I realize there's a light on it? We don't need drills, we need holes in the wall. We need to start thinking as consumers differently. And then businesses need to start delivering stuff for us. So we're shifting to a new system. We as consumers need to shift. Businesses need to shift. We need to design out waste right from the very beginning. Designers, manufacturers need to think about, okay, when we're producing something, can it be disassembled? Can it be taken apart? Can that foam that is produced, why? All those rare metals that are used in there, why are we using it? Can we use substitute materials? Can we stop using composite materials? Can we stop sticking things together? Can we start separating things? So we need to design out waste. We need to think about that in the first place. Can we keep, once we've designed it, can we keep that product in circulation as much as and as long as we possibly can? And then when we can't, then we start looking at repair, then we start looking at recycling it. And can we ensure that we regenerate natural systems? So I started off saying, don't forget all about sustainability, because this is a key. Sustainability is about minimizing impact. It's about those pillars of social, environmental, economic, and culture. And then maximizing opportunity in terms of the circular economy. And for me, businesses have a role to innovate. Consumers have a role to participate. And with government, we can create a system that ensures products can circulate to deliver a sustainable future. So I hope in a brief, I've put over the enthusiasm for this change, and I hope I've conveyed that, if nothing else. Thank you.
Oh, Brian, that was absolutely wonderful. I love it. I love it when you say about the about the drill, it really does make me think, like you're right, absolutely everyone has one. And I don't think many people do use it for more than 20 minutes in their whole lifetime, you know? So, and thank you as well for pointing out the 8 R's, because I have to say, just through organising these webinars, I started off thinking there were 4, then 6, and now I'm fully aware that there are 8. I think Tara's on the call tonight, one of our trustees, and she taught me that. So what's really lovely now is that we've got Bettina Gilbert here. Thank you, Brian. Sorry, absolutely wonderful, as always. And your enthusiasm is what always shines through as well. So I'm going to introduce now Bettina Gilbert. And Bettina has over 15 years experience managing business support in projects in Wales and has been at WRAP since 2010. And for those who haven't heard of WRAP, they provide Wales-specific support on behalf of the Welsh Government, including delivery on the Circular Economy Fund. So Bettina runs the organisational engagement programme in Wales, working with the public, resource management and manufacturing, food and drink sectors, and to help Wales ultimately transition to a more circular and environmentally sustainable economy. And also, Bettina, I did read that you're also studying for an MBA at the moment at Warwick.
Oh no, I finished my MBA. So that's, yeah. It's been just over a year now. So I believe in lifelong learning. I'm a big advocate for lifelong learning.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I did an MBA at Warwick last year. I graduated.
Oh, fantastic. You have to update your LinkedIn.
Yeah. Not hard.
No. Oh, over to you though, Bettina. Thank you.
Brilliant. Do you need to, am I host?
Sorry, yes, I believe you are now, yes. Okay. So you should be able to share your screen.
Brilliant. There we go. Brilliant. All right. Well, I'm really excited to be here today. And, it's great to see so many people have come out in their evening to spend time learning about this. I also feel like, Brian, you've really put the pressure on. But in some ways, I'm hoping to just follow on from what Brian's been saying. I think that our presentations hopefully will dovetail, in your opinion. So what I wanted to do is just talk to you just firstly about a few of the reasons about why the circular economy is so important. I mean, Brian was talking about food. So let me just, some of you might be familiar with some of these figures, but let me just drive this home a little bit. But I'll start off by telling you about WRAP. So WRAP is an organization that works with businesses, governments, and citizens around the globe to reduce waste and increase resource efficiency. We're working in 20 different countries around the globe now. And our work, really the focus of our work, we're an evidence-based organization. So we collect a lot of data. Anytime you see stats or Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall talking about, the war on waste, that's probably a WRAP stat. All that information comes from WRAP. We're an evidence-based organization. And because of that, we focus on where we think we can make the biggest difference. So currently our focus is on food waste prevention, it's on plastics, it's on textiles, and it's on the effective management of resources. So why do we focus in these areas? So what our evidence tells us is that food waste, well, a third of food waste produced around the world is wasted, a third of it. That's 1.3 billion tons of food wasted each year around the globe, and it's worth an estimated $940 billion US. So food waste that's disposed of in landfill, it generates methane, and methane is a greenhouse gas that's 25% more powerful and damaging than carbon dioxide. And if food waste were a country, it would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So food waste is making a huge impact on, on global warming, basically. And in the UK, food and drink production and consumption accounts for 20% of our territorial greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a fifth of our greenhouse gas emissions comes from food waste. In Wales, homes throw out about 200,000 tons of edible food per year. We throw that in the waste. So, and also for food producers, food waste represents not only a cost, but it represents a lost opportunity where they could be making money from that waste. In terms of clothing, across the EU and the UK, clothing is the 8th largest sector in terms of household spending. We spend 45 billion on 1 million tons of clothes every year. I heard a stat, and I'm not quite sure if it's a WRAP stat, but apparently there's enough clothes on the planet to clothe the next 13 generations of people. right? Clothing is ranked 4th in terms of its environmental impact. It's huge, and it comes just behind housing, transport, and food. But we throw away 300,000 tons of clothes every year into the landfill in the UK. And the clothing that we send to landfill or that we incinerate in the UK is worth 82 million pounds. And despite this, you know, we throw away a lot, but we have 6 billion garments in our wardrobes. And these are worth about 100 billion pounds. And about a third of this we haven't worn in 12 months. So we have about 30 billion pounds of clothing in our wardrobes we haven't worn in 12 months. Now, there's reasons for that. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Most of it is that it doesn't fit us anymore, but it's perfectly good clothing. So in terms of plastics, we have, in Wales, it's estimated that we generate 400,000 tons of plastic waste annually. And although we lead the way in household recycling in the UK and we're 3rd in the rest of the world, you know, that's really great. We're great at collecting it, but we still throw a lot away. And although plastic household packaging manufactured in Wales contains over 50% recycled content, so we have a lot of plastic packaging manufacturers in Wales, and on average, they're using more than 50% content in the household packaging. So I'm talking about drinks, bottles, and things like that. We're doing really, really well in that area, but there's only 10% recycled content in the plastics that we manufacture overall in Wales. So there's a significant amount of work that we could do in that area. And plastics aren't the only material that we need to create markets for. There's other challenging materials where market failures currently exist, and these include paper and cardboard and textiles. So this is in relation to Wales and how we're doing in Wales. So paper and card in Wales represents the majority of our dry recyclates, the majority of what's collected. And of the 1.3 million tons that arise, you know, of the waste of paper and card, annually less than half of that is recycled. The textiles are the fourth most prevalent material in household waste in Wales, but it makes up less than 10% of the materials that are collected by local authorities for recycling. So obviously we reuse a lot, but still there's more work we can do in that area. And in Wales, there's no markets for, closed-loop markets for clothes. So once it goes into the waste stream, once it's not being used for reuse, and we decide we don't want it anymore, there's no way to recover those textiles in Wales. And actually that technology is just kind of developing and growing now. And so that's another reason why WRAP focuses on that area quite a lot. And, you know, there's a lot of policy instruments that are designed to increase the collection and recovery of materials. But the use of, you know, we can collect them all we want, but if we're not doing what Brian was saying and using these materials in our products as well, we're never going to achieve a circular economy. So, so WRAP has quite a few, you know, we focus on, you know, we have levers of change, we do policy and technical support, we do a lot of consumer behavior change engagement and financial support as well. We offer financial tools that deliver grants and things like that. And we deliver these through big national programs working with huge amounts of the supply chain. So our Core Told Commitment, which is focusing on the food supply chain, has over 90% of the retail, the grocery market in the UK involved in that. The UK Plastics Pact has represents over 80% of the plastics packaging put on the market in the UK. So WRAP is doing some really big programs in our SCAP program, which is working on sustainable clothing. We're engaging that retail market, but really what I wanted to do was tell you a little bit about what we're doing in Wales to deliver on the policy objectives of the Welsh Government and beyond recycling, which you mentioned earlier. So I lead a team of people in Wales that deliver on specific Welsh Government policy objectives. We focus on delivering green public procurement support to the public sector. So what they're doing is they're driving demand by writing into their tenders when they're buying products and into their policies and into their strategies that they'll buy more sustainable products. And we're helping them quite a lot with things like, understanding circular business models and then helping, drive that demand for those products in Wales, buying reused products, buying products with recycled content. We also work with manufacturers to use recycled content in their products. So this work is not focused on packaging. It's focused, because we're already good at using recycled content and packaging in Wales. It's focused on really high volume products where it's a little bit tricky to use recycled content currently. So we're focusing on products like hazardous waste containers, households, like caddies and kitchen, plastics, hard plastics used in your kitchen, sharps boxes, the sharps boxes that so they're medical products and also construction products. And what we found from that work is that, it's not really just a case of one day I'm using a virgin plastic and the next day, bing, bang, boom, I'm using a recycled plastic. These products have different technical properties, and you have to work across supply chains to, first of all, source those materials, to develop all the right technical properties in them, and then to test your products and make sure that they're meeting all the, properties that they need to make it to market. And that takes months and months and months. It's not an easy thing to do. And so that's a lot of our focus. And in the public sector, what we found is that, people in the public sector, they're very busy and they don't have the information that, just like a lot of people working in businesses don't, to make those choices. How do you decide whether I should be buying a glass milk bottle or a plastic milk bottle, and which one is better? And how do you drive that change across an organization to make those right decisions? And so we're doing a lot of technical support, we're working on policy, but we're also providing guidance and materials to people to help them with those everyday choices and make the right choices. And then the final thing we're doing is the Circular Economy Fund in my team, which provides grants for investment in these areas. All right, so I couldn't give this presentation without talking about the Collaborative Change Program. In Wales, we have a team of people. It's not my team, it's another team. And we're working with local authorities to help them design their collection services for recyclates. So, and help them market materials. And actually, recycling services generally are a loss maker for local authorities. The public, we fund that activity through our taxes. And so what we do is we work with local authorities to make those systems a lot more efficient and a lot more cost effective and a lot more revenue generating, most importantly. And to make sure, actually most importantly, to make sure that we're recycling a lot. And this is one reason why Wales is the third best recycling nation in the world. And with the local authorities that we've worked with, some of them have increased their recycling rates as much as 14% as a result of our support through this program. And then finally, the other thing we're really working on now is Be Mighty. So I'm hoping that everybody has seen this. It's our consumer behavior change campaign we're delivering with the Welsh Government. The aim is really to get Wales to be the #1 recycler. Now, this is very much consumer facing, and hopefully you've seen the TV commercials, you've seen it on the radio, you've seen it on lorries if they've been driving down the street. But the one thing I wanted to point out here is that when RAP designs these campaigns, we do all the research behind them. We test all the messaging so we know it's effective. We've done a lot of work on understanding people's motivations and their values and their behaviors around the circular economy. And when we deliver these campaigns, we deliver them with partners. So we provide free of charge business partners, local authorities, anybody access to these materials. They can co-brand them or they can change them so they're relevant to their organization. And what it does is it helps them deliver communications we know that's going to work because we've tested them and we evaluate the programs at the end. But also it helps them show their customers and all the people they're working with that they're doing the right thing. For us, it helps us amplify our messages. So really, it's win-win all the way around. Now, I'm not gonna, I didn't have my time going, so I'm not quite sure how I'm doing on time, but RAP did publish in July a Build Back Better strategy. And this basically talked about, we gave, really for policymakers in the UK, it's how to build back better from COVID by driving forward the circular economy. And there's 6 recommendations in there that include really that focus on reuse and remanufacturing and repair, all those other R's that will create jobs and develop more resilient businesses. There's recommendations to use a target, measure, act approach. So this is an approach that RAP advocates and that we try to use in all of our work. And it basically encourages people, it says target, measure, act. But what we do is we help people measure in the first instance, because you don't understand the benefits and can't make that change unless you understand where your waste is arising. Yeah, and so this is really about stopping waste from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
And delivering this target, measure, act approach, but also using that as a requirement for people when they're getting funding from the government, for example, to take a target, measure, act approach as a requirement of that funding. So there's a number of, this report is available on our website. There's 6 key recommendations in there. And, if you have a chance, go ahead and take a look. And the last thing I wanted to do is, and you can share these slides afterwards, is we have all of our guidance is available, and although it might not be, directly, so for example, my guidance for the public sector on making packaging choices when they're buying, that's just as relevant to businesses. So a lot of our key things here, we have a new Clear on Plastics campaign for consumers. There's lots of stuff out there that's relevant to anybody making decisions about buying products, making products, yeah. And that is me.
Thank you so much, Bettina. I think certainly what I've gathered from kind of putting these together is that it is a huge area and it can feel very overwhelming, but it is essentially, and I think you showed that really well there, just creating loops, creating small loops, turn them into bigger loops, that's essentially what it's about, isn't it?
Yes,
so,
definitely.
I was just going to say thank you. We have had a couple of questions. I don't know. I saw that in the chat box that Jennifer, you asked a question. I don't know if you want to ask it yourself, or if you're happy for me to do that from the chat box.
I don't mind, as you like.
Yeah, go for it, Jennifer. No, that would be really good. Bettina, Jennifer had a question for you.
Thanks very much for the talk. Just one of your first slides, because it's always interested me, because I'm a home composter. So the 1.3 billion tonnes, do you count in what people might be home composting or putting in a hot composter? Or for example, Swansea, the council is saying they're taking our food waste and then burning it to create electricity. So is your 1.3 billion tonnes kind of all of the food waste, or is it all of the food waste that's going specifically to landfill?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, right? So that's a global figure, and I believe that's a waste figure. So it doesn't count.
Global.
So recovery is recovery, and that is waste. Now, I will have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the waste figure.
Okay. Cool. So
it's unbelievable. So that's why it's creating all those carbon emissions. So if you were going into composting, you'd still have some emissions. If it was energy recovery, hopefully you'd recover those gases, right?
So I mean, my understanding though is even if we consume the food, we're still exhaling CO2, and that has come from us effectively combusting the food. So is it that composting is still worse than eating it? Yeah.
Well, I think the best thing is always avoiding waste in the first place. Yeah, that's the principles of the waste hierarchy. So, a lot of effort and resources has gone into that food. So even if it's composting, it's doing better. It's better than, it just going to landfill and rotting, definitely. But because it's regenerating our soil, and that's really important. So the big thing about the circular economy is also a regenerative economy. And so, that's one of the principles behind the circular economy. I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. I can see a couple of more have come through, which is absolutely wonderful. Gabriella, did you want to come in as well? Because you made a really interesting comment there too.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, the comment really, and I suppose it can be linked to any of the conversations we're having around the circular economy is, we talk about people making the right choices, but a lot of those times those choices can be more costly. And so people often think of sustainability as being like to do with privilege.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around helping consumers who are from low-income families? You know, what should we be doing? What should governments be doing to help those make better choices? Sorry.
Thank you. Bettina, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I can definitely add to that one. So food waste prevention in the home on average can save every UK consumer £60 a month. Yeah. So immediately there's a savings there. It's not so much about, you know, and really simple things can be done, you know, just having your refrigerator at the right temperature. And so that's what we try to do with our behavior change campaigns, is focus on the things, the waste arisings that are happen most often, like bread waste, milk waste, and things like that, and find simple tips for people to do. We do a lot of work around portion control and freezing, but sometimes, you know, teaching people how to cook differently. These things are value-based. They're learned from your parents, right? So they're very difficult to change. So all of our behavior change campaigns really try to focus on, you know, simple things that people can implement, but then make a big difference. I'd say with clothing again, you know, my big thing is, you know, we have enough for 13 generations. Let's buy less, right? And again, with behaviors around clothing, it's built a lot into social norms. So the reason why people don't so much like to buy reused clothes is not because, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with your income, whether you're recycling or whether you're reusing things. It's not based on income. That's, you know, that's not what the research tells us. It's much more about social norms, about behaviors, about motivations, about having access to services. And I think with clothing, a big thing is not only those social norms, the cost is so cheap, right? It's easy to buy cheap clothes. So that's a problem. But also, we also know that there's this thing that's called the yuck factor. So there's a perception that if you buy clothes from a charity shop, it has that smell, right? But there's really simple things that can be done to, you know, overcome that perception, but also working with the charity sector to say, you know, are there things we can help you with to just help you overcome those barriers? So yeah, I don't think that being sustainable has to be more expensive. And certainly in our work with businesses, like when we're working with the public sector, what we do is we say, let's look at this analysis for your spend and where you're buying things. And I would recommend this approach for businesses too, not on just a single product, but maybe a category of products. So you might, you know, spend more on a more sustainable product, you know, in terms of packaging, but actually you're going to save use by having, you know, cutlery in your canteen rather than, you know, disposable, single-use disposables. So we try to get them to look at kind of a suite of products, and almost, you know, taking that approach, you can find cost savings. You can definitely maintain costs, and quite often you can save costs as well.
Thank you so much.
Just a little bit, please.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, Brian, go for it.
I think the issues raised around behaviour are really important in terms of looking at how you can create savings, and also an issue, what is used in procurement, but we as individuals can take into account, is the total cost of ownership of something, in terms of, you know, if it might be perhaps a bit expensive at the beginning, but if it lasts twice as long, then it's an actual saving. So you've got to, and different ways of us being able to access goods. Is it through repairs? Is it through, I remember doing research once on looking at different words, second-hand or vintage. So the same shirt, which was second-hand, but call it vintage, the price increased. It was exactly the same thing. But the mindset around how we can look at different things, behavior change, looking at when we're buying something and its length of ownership is a huge impact, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Do you know what, Gabriella, I'm so glad though that you asked this question, because when we were trying to come up with like 4 questions for this, I wanted to start the first one off with giving an overview of what it is, but next week's one is specifically going to deal with this, saying, is it really possible to live a sustainable or a zero waste lifestyle right now? And one of the people that's going to be coming along is going to be talking about the financial barriers, even just the simple things at the moment, like if you want the council to come and take away kind of white goods or mattresses or anything from your home, you have to pay for that. And £20 is a lot of money for people, you know? So we really wanted, that's why it's the second one in the series. And I can see Helen O'Sullivan is in our comment box at the moment, and she's actually doing a PhD at the moment in the kind of the 6-8 R's and sustainable fashion. So she's also going to be speaking next week, and we're really going to focus on that, because I think you're absolutely right. I think with all the best will in the world at the moment, it's just not something that's possible for everybody, and that's a huge part of this. So thank you, and I hope you come next week, Gabriella. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm coming to all the sessions, but I thank you, Bettina and Brian, for answering. Cheers.
Thank you. I'm just going to take one more question, if that's okay, before we move on, because you've got a wonderful presentation to end with, which is going to be, I think, a really good example of all of this, and will tie up a lot of the questions. But I really did want to bring Mary-Ann in, because she's the organiser of the Repair Cafe in Abergavenny, and she's got a question as well, and a comment and a question. So Mary-Ann, if you wanted to come in and share that, that would be wonderful. Oh, Mary-Ann, we can't quite hear you. Are you a little bit, your mic might be a little bit down.
Let me try. No, it's up as high as possible. Can you hear me now?
No, I'm afraid not. It's still quite faint.
Oh, could you just read the question then? Thank
Yes, I can. No problem at all. So Mary-Ann has said one frustration we have is an item that cannot be opened without being damaged or destroyed, or a part is needed which can't be accessed. So what is being done with right to repair, and what can individuals do to help drive this? So Bettina or Brian.
I'll start off then on that one. So I've done a lot of work actually around electronics, yeah, and not only about the behaviors, but about increasing, you know, their lifetime and their circularity. And certainly, you know, when people ask about the circular economy, it's not just, and I think Brian really highlighted this, there's not just one thing we can do, it's a combination of things. When it comes to electronics, for me, it's all about implementing policy measures, you know, making sure that actually government needs to make sure that the products have to be repairable. Government needs to make sure that spare parts are available, made available, yeah. So for me, I think that there's a real role for policy in here. And then once that happens, then we get, you know, then we start to really, you know, drive consumer behavior change around this area. You know, and you can see good examples of that happening, and businesses, you know, are, you know, starting to do that. Certainly the EU is looking at this, but it's always a combination of, you know, of measures that creates change. That's my opinion on that.
Mary-Ann, I hope, oh, go on, Brian, sorry.
Yeah, very briefly, I agree with what Bettina said, but there are a lot of policy measures taking place now in Europe and the UK that are driving all of the things that we've been talking about, from things like extended producer responsibility. So that's putting the emphasis back onto manufacturers to say, look, you're producing this stuff, you're going to have to be responsible for it. So it's got to be repairable, it's got to be reusable, otherwise you won't be able to get it on the market. You know, deposit return schemes, all of these things, I mean, have unintended consequences, but as we look at each and one of every of these different types of policy measures, then we need to consider what the outcomes of it. And my final comment is that, don't forget, in Wales now we're developing our circular economy strategy beyond recycling. And I know that one of the final speakers of the webinar series will be David Warren. So I really encourage you to listen to what Welsh Government are doing. And I was in a webinar with Welsh Government quite recently, and one of the biggest things that the audience highlighted, what needs to be done, is to look at reuse and repair and remanufacturing. Well above recycling, they are the areas that they wanted government to concentrate on. So hopefully the more that government can concentrate on that, then the more opportunities there will be to repair, reuse, remanufacture our products. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for being here this evening. Marianne, and from Buckland-Jones. We really appreciate that. I hope that answered the question, but add in anything else into the comment box. So we're actually going to move on now because I'm really excited about this. We've got Shea Buckland-Jones from WWF Cymru here tonight, and he's the Food, Land Use and Nature Policy Manager. And I was kind of scouting around trying to find, interesting ways of demonstrating the circular economy and what's happening at the moment, and to give a good example. And I'm glad actually that I think both Bettina and Brian tonight, and some of you in the comments as well, have touched on food waste in particular. So WWF and the Sustainable Places Research Institute at Cardiff University have produced this report and recommendations called A Welsh Food System Fit for Future Generations. Now, a key element of the circular economy succeeding in Wales is going to be ensuring a joined up agenda. And I know that this is what Welsh Government is setting out to do as well. And, for Sustainable Wales, this report, which you should all have received the link to, but I'm also going to pop in the chat box now, demonstrates how many parts of our everyday life, as well as I think many things we talked about tonight, design and policy, can be done in a circular way, as well as encompassing collective, cooperative models that do prioritise those sustainable development goals. So I'm going to pass over to Shea, and then we're very fortunate as well. We've got a last minute addition, but I'm thrilled about this because Dr. Angelina Sanderson-Bellamy, who actually worked on this with Shea, is also here this evening, and so she's going to be able to come in and say a little bit and answer some questions about this. So I'm just going to let you share your screen, Shea, and then I'm going to pass over. One moment. There we go. So yes, thank you. I'm thrilled myself to hear more about this because I've read the report, but it's going to be lovely to hear you both delivering on this because it is really exciting.
Great, thank you so much, and it's really exciting to be here and really support the work of Sustainable Wales. So it's been, I think the last time I did a talk for you guys was probably back in, I don't know, maybe 2016, in a lovely building on the Porthcawl seafront. It's quite a different setting in my house this evening, but nevertheless, it's still good to support you and support your work. So as already mentioned, I'm Shea Buckland-Jones. I lead on food and land use for WWF Cymru. I've only been in the job just over a year now, but I've worked in and around the environment sector in Wales for 10 years or so, spanning housing, renewable energy, which is the kind of area I've worked most with Sustainable Wales on, and land use, and finally landed on food and land use in particular at WWF Cymru. And the first question people often ask myself and colleagues is, why are WWF making food its global priority? And it has been a priority for us for over 5-10 years now. And the reason is quite simple. Food production globally has is one of the biggest threats to the environment. It's something we call the triple challenge currently the world faces around tackling climate change, around reversing biodiversity loss, and at the same time feeding a growing population. And we're quite clear that you can't really address that triple challenge without fixing the food system. I haven't got presentation slides to share. I thought I'd just talk generically and broadly kind of introduce some of my thoughts to the topic, given it's quite an informal and evening setting. But what I'm going to do, and I'm going to put a bit of a twist on the discussion so far. So I think they've been quite technical, and I found them really, really useful. And I've learned quite a lot in the first two presentations. But as Sarah said, I'm going to talk broadly, not just necessarily about circular economy, but a range of other initiatives and how they all join up. So I'm going to touch on circular economy, the regenerative economy, foundational economy, all those different initiatives in Wales, and how you join up a more integrated food system. But if I first start with some context around food and spelling out, I guess, the challenges around the food system as a starter. And just to be clear, when we talk about the food system, we talk about the way we produce food, the way we manufacture and process food, the way we consume food, right from farm to fork or from sea to fork, however you view it. But clearly, in terms of the current state of play around food in Wales, we know in Wales we've declared a climate and nature emergency. We know the food system has a big impact on climate and nature. So, we know 1 in 6 species are at risk of extinction in Wales, and we know unsustainable agricultural management is the biggest driver of biodiversity loss. We know agriculture contributes 12% of climate change, but it's not just about what we produce at home in terms of our food production. It's also about the wider global system and what we consume as well. So when we think about what Wales import, what we buy, what we invest in, often that comes with significant impacts in terms of unethical practices and environmental degradation. And one area WWF have a lot of expertise on is global footprint and deforestation. And we launched a report back in July this year called Riskier Business, which looks at the kind of UK's overseas footprint. And the report basically concluded that we think about the UK's land area. 88% of the total UK land area is used elsewhere to grow and just provide the UK's demand for 7 commodities. Most of them are agricultural commodities, so those types of products. And what we're finding is out of that 88% land area, about 28% of those commodities are grown in areas with high risks of deforestation. And those commodities are driving deforestation, and we're importing those into Wales in an everyday context. Market shelves, and we know that if we lose another 5% of the Amazon, we lose the fight against climate change. If we obviously look at the impacts of deforestation on habitat destruction, but also there's an increase in evidence, scientific evidence, to link deforestation to global pandemic risk. Can I just check everyone can hear me, because it looks like I'm cutting in and out?
You just had a few kind of like seconds there where you were in and out, but it seems okay again now.
Great, brilliant. I was just talking about deforestation, and I guess the risks to climate change, and if we lose 5% of the Amazon, we lose the fight against climate change. It's driving habitat destruction. We know the risks between deforestation and pandemic risk. So, the more we're deforesting, we're bringing humans closer to wildlife, and that in itself is driving more pandemic risk, of pathogens like COVID-19. So our food system's having a big impact on those types of things, which are obviously having clear impacts. And I think when you look at our Wales context, what we think, or what we consume, what we invest in, and what we import really has an impact on that. And I think that's where some of the circular economy can come in, when we really think about things in a local sense, and really think about what are we purchasing, how do we obviously drive waste, but reuse and obviously work within the hierarchy. But part of that message is, if you're driving deforestation out of the supply chain and you're not importing so many kind of unsustainable products, how do you use more local products? How do you use kind of fresh grass, hay, and all those types of things in a circular economy, and regenerating soils and all that type of stuff to drive those bad practices out of the system? And generally speaking, when you look at, obviously we've got a national indicator around our ecological footprint in Wales as part of the Future Generations Act, and we use far more than our Earth's fair share of resources in Wales. We use 2.5 planets worth, and I think this has already been mentioned previously in terms of food waste. If you mounted up food waste, it would be, as a country, it'd be the 3rd largest country in terms of its emissions output, behind USA and China. And the crazy thing to some extent is, in terms of what we produce globally in food terms, we produce more than enough food already to feed the existing population, and we could feed another 2 billion people. But what we're finding is, there's 800 million people globally going hungry. Still land and deforested land to produce. So I think Bettina mentioned it earlier in terms of, we're wasting 200,000 tons of food each year in Wales. And from the figures I've seen, that amounts to around 600 million. And at the same time, we've got lot of people in Wales, more and more people going to food banks who can't afford food. You know, we're seeing 160,000 children in Wales who find it hard to afford a healthy diet. You know, we're seeing obesity costing the Welsh NHS around 70 million a year. And beyond that, when you look at production, farmers and others are not paid a fair wage for what they do. So when you look at the system as a whole, you need to think about it in terms of, you know, how do you connect the system better? How do you link production and consumption? How do you drive strategy and policy to drive waste out of the system and have more of a circular, foundational, regenerative economy? And that leads me to some extent to the Cardiff University report. So, you know, we're well aware of these issues in WWF, and we've done work globally to address it. And I could talk for hours if I talked about our global initiatives and pieces of work. But with us having a new focus on food, should we say, in Wales in the last year and a half, the first thing I did was commission Dr. Sanderson Bellamy and Professor Terry Marsden at the Sustainable Places Institute to say, actually, we know these problems exist. If you designed a food system fit for future generations in Wales, what would it actually look like if you mapped it against the Sustainable Development Goals, obviously the Wellbeing Goals of the Future Generations Act, and the ways of working? And clearly one of the ways of working in the Act is around integration, you know, connecting economic, social, environmental, and cultural considerations in Wales. And they produced this report for us, which we launched in March in the Senedd this year. And I'll just show you a quick infographic from, let's have a look. So this is an infographic from the report, which I'll talk you through it briefly, but it outlines, if you design this food system fit for future generation, these are the types of outcomes you would see from aligning the food system to the goals of the Future Generations Act. And just to pick up on some of these from the infographic, you know, if you were delivering a resilient Wales, you'd have a nature-based agro-ecological farming system in Wales that helps restore biodiversity, restores our soil health, has a regenerative approach to farming production. You know, if you were driving a Wales of cohesive communities, you'd have civil organisations, food hubs and cooperative bodies promoting local food initiatives. If you had a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, you'd make sure the food was more of a fundamental part of the foundational economy. And although it is classed as an essential part of our foundational economy in Wales in terms of, you know, local and all those messages that come from that, I think there's potential for it to be more of a priority within that foundational economy landscape. And one of the kind of recommendations from the report alongside that infographic, and really the main recommendation from the report, was around delivering and co-creating a new vision for Welsh food that's based around 10 key interlinked themes. And again, I'll share my screen briefly to show you that infographic, which basically, in terms of creating a new vision for Welsh food, is based around these 10 themes, which, you know, running through them is all around kind of relocalizing supply chains, driving a regenerative system. And I'll talk through some of these points, and I'll bring Angelina in at some point soon as well to talk you through it. But as you can see there, it's around kind of agro-ecological farming, driving more horticulture promotion, food and vegetables, which, you know, we don't produce enough of in Wales currently. Increasing our local infrastructure, so having sustainable food hubs, having food cooperatives, and driving those local things, so you have shorter supply chains and you have kind of potential for less waste and so on in the system. And just to explain agroecology to some of you who might not, I guess, understand the concept, and well, going back slightly, I guess one of the interesting things from the Cardiff University report is it links very nicely with another report which I'd recommend everyone on this call to read. It's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and they've done a lot on kind of circular economy thinking, and they've got a fantastic report out called Cities and the Circular Economy for Food. And some of the key messages in that report are similar to the messages in the Cardiff University report around things like, you know, source food that's grown regeneratively through agroecology, you know, ideally source food that is locally produced where appropriate, you know, make the most of food and market healthier food products. And going back to that agroecology point, the kind of there's some central components to an agroecological approach, and it's all around kind of farming practices to mitigate climate change. So you reduce emissions, you work with wildlife, you recycle resources in the system, so you restore in soil health. You're not excessively using things in the food system like nitrates, pesticides, and other things which ultimately kill soil health. And one point I've made with a wider Wales Environment Link body in Wales is, I think a lot of the circular economy to date focuses on quite technical aspects. I think when you're looking at the circular economy, Wales needs to capture more of the biological needs in the process as well. Otherwise, we create potential problems along the line around, serious impact on our soil's ability to create food in the future, damage to our biodiversity and some of our ecosystems. So I think Welsh Government need to think about that in some of the more systematic ways. But agroecology, one of the other principles is around kind of prioritizing local supply chains, putting farmers at the heart and communities at the driving seat to design local approaches which best suit production practices in local contexts. And local sourcing, I'm a big fan when it came to previous jobs that had around renewable energy and so on, driving a renewable energy system, having more local renewable energy production, using that consumption in a local sense, so you're not transferring energy over large distances and wasting it in the process through heated cables and all that type of stuff. I think the similar principles apply around food, getting people to strengthen their connection with food and the farmers who grow it, driving that sustainable practice. I think local sourcing introduces some of the elements we've talked about already, reducing the need for excess food packaging, shortening distribution supply chains when appropriate to really influence the sustainability in the supply chain. And I think there's some clear lessons from COVID in particular when you look at the food system. And the particular need to have kind of resilient strategies around food. So one of the examples would be, back in April, this would have been when we were really getting into the start and the thick of COVID. What you found were farmers, for example, across Wales throwing and pouring their milk down the drain because the industries they were producing food for pre-COVID, hospitality industries. So whether it's Costa Coffee or whether it was, wider industries like British Airways or, industries which ultimately shut down during the obviously COVID period. I think if you'd had better, more resilient supply chains, that more of a focus on better local infrastructure, then you might have not had circumstances, or you would certainly reduce circumstances where we were wasting food in that way. And I think some of this comes down to, the behavior of the likes of you and I, how we shop for our food, how we reconnect with our food. We do have choices. We can look at accreditation. We can make those sensible choices, but also at a policy level, driving things out of the supply chain. And I think it is a mix of these kind of circular and foundational economy principles. The foundational economy offers that approach around, reducing the leakage of money from communities, addressing the environmental costs of extended supply chains. And there's some really good work happening in Welsh Government at the moment, to be fair, around some of the foundational economy stuff. And it's already been mentioned a few times in the previous talks. One good example is procurement, and they're funding a Carmarthenshire County Council project at the moment, which really kind of links local and regional food businesses supplying the public sector through procurement. And I think we need more and more of that type of setup in Wales. But I think we need more, and this comes back to the recommendations in the report, more kind of local infrastructures for food. So we need things like more local food markets, more local food hubs, just better ways to link producers to consumers, more diverse ways to do it. And, getting community growers to step up, driving things like community supported agriculture, where, a consumer might buy a share of a farm's harvest, for example, in advance, and they'll pay a membership fee. They get a variety of freshly packaged fruit, maybe on a weekly basis, that can be organic or whatever. And driving those, as I've said already, more direct links between growers and consumers, you can drive, less food packaging and all those types of things out of the supply chain. And there's some really good examples and case studies across Wales, things like Slade Farm, a mixed organic farm in South Wales, Wales. It's got a mix of arable, livestock. It's got community-supported agriculture. You know, they're contributing to biodiversity, social cohesion, employment, local supply chains. You know, you will all know about things like Aberystwyth food surplus. You know, collecting food from local businesses that are throwing away good food and redistributing that amongst the community, and you know, showing that waste food can be tasty and nutritious. And I won't go into fair share and you know some of the wrap campaigns which have already been mentioned, but I'll just mention a couple of things to finish. One of the things I've been helping to set up in Wales in the last year is the Food Policy Alliance Cymru, which is a coalition of organisations coming together to develop more integration across the food system, linking production and consumption, thinking about the food system in a more circular, regenerative and foundational economy sense. And there's a really good mix of organisations working in kind of policy as well as practice on the ground in that group, and we're starting to build momentum. And the other thing I haven't mentioned, I guess from WWF's perspective, across the UK and even globally, one of the things we do is drive a lot of corporate partnerships. So one of our main corporate partnerships in the UK at the moment is a corporate partnership with Tesco. So we've got a 5-year project with Tesco, so we're 2 years into that, and that's basically all around helping Tesco improve their environmental credentials. And we've agreed a target with them to halve the halve the environmental impact of the average shopping basket by 2030. And there's a range of strands that kind of sit within that project that we'll be developing. We have developed some of them and we'll be developing over the next 3 years. And they focus on things like nature-friendly food production. And one of the strands is around food waste. So we're really working with Tesco to look at their own supply chain, but also work with them on campaigns to work with households and others to drive that out of the system. And without being an expert on other areas, we have all kinds of corporate partnerships in around clothing, for example. We work with H&M to improve the sustainability of their supply chain. We've got endless corporate partnerships, which I could talk about for hours and hours, to be honest. And I've probably gone over already. So I'll stop there and maybe let you introduce Angelina.
Oh, Shea, that was absolutely wonderful. And I have also put the link in the chat box. So I really hope that that you'll kind of, everyone will go away and have a look at it, because I do think it's wonderful. And I think what you've captured there, Shea, is really that, as I said at the beginning, in order for this to be successful, it really is going to have to be a joined up agenda. And I think that that's why, you know, whenever we're doing anything now to do with the circular economy, it's always important to have a look and a scout around really and just see what other people are doing that might not come under that circular economy umbrella, but really everything needs to be joined up. I'm trying to keep us to 7:45 as close as I possibly can. So I was just wondering if I can bring Angelina in to help with answering some questions on this. So also I just wanted to echo as well, our director Margaret Minhinnick, you know, just said, and it's very true. All of what you were saying engages community participation, democracy, local ownership, and local jobs, which are all the things that Margaret, you know, has been campaigning for decades. This is what it's all about. So yeah, so I just wanted to ask, does anybody have any specific questions about what Shea was just talking about? If anybody wants to say.
Sarah, can I just ask one?
Yeah, of course, come in, Tara, that'd be great.
Hi, Shea. Thanks for that. One of the things that I'm quite passionate about is how do we make this actually start to happen? How do we make some of these loops start to happen on a local small level? And I'm just wondering, ideas from yourself, particularly on the food. You mentioned about making the links between farmers and the consumers. What are your thoughts on how we actually go about getting that started and making that happen? And then similarly to Bettina, where you referenced your work around working with supply chains and businesses, how do we link up one business's discarded material? It could be like gold dust and supply another. You know, how do we make these small loops start to happen?
Angelina, do you want to give it a go so you get a chance to speak before?
Yeah, I can. And actually, Shea, you did a great job
Thank
You did a great job speaking to the agroecology, so I didn't feel that I needed to add anything more to that. In terms of how do we get this started, I think there's a lot of different things that need to be happening. And actually, there's a lot of things that are already happening. In a lot of communities across Wales, there are a lot of amazing initiatives happening. But I think part of the problem is there's a lack of knowledge about these different amazing things happening. And so one of the projects I've just been working on is mapping the various different food system actors and the stuff that they're working on, so that can actually act as a resource for other communities that would like to get going on some of these kinds of actions. In terms of linking up farmers and producers, the organization Social Farms and Gardens, one of their big things is about getting a CSA in every community. So I think part of it is there's just not very many of the farms that are providing these kinds of direct linkages at the moment. I guess on the community side, and then you've got on the government side, actions that they can be taking to better support producers who want to move into agroecological production. So that's just something briefly there.
Brilliant, thank you.
I wouldn't add much to that. I would just say, I guess at the other end of the spectrum in terms of the foundational economy program, for example, just having more funding from that for demonstration projects and pilots. One thing we're very bad at in Wales is scaling up good practice. It's always been a thing of ours. So I think, as Angelina says, picking up those pockets of knowledge and demonstrating that they can work at scale would be something that would be appealing.
Thank you. Bettina, did you want to answer Tara's second question as well?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. So there's two things I just want to say quickly. One is that, we used to just provide support to individual manufacturers to use recycled content in their products. And now we're taking that much more supply chain approach, so we can find those people and talk to the people who are providing those materials. But we've also done mapping. So we have a map of the bioeconomy in Wales that's published on RAP's website. I use this, and we use these tools for our program planning and supporting the Welsh Government, but we also publish them so people can find that person on their doorstep. And we also have a plastics map of Wales on our website, which we're updating now. And we're soon going to add paper and card to that. And and we know that people are finding people down the road, those connections are being made. Who, one man's rubbish is another man's gold. Yeah.
Absolutely, I love that. That's what it's all about, isn't it? I also wanted to just say, Jennifer, you had a really good question as well for Angelina and Shea about community-supported agriculture. Did you want to ask that as well?
Yeah, I think life cycle analysis is a really important thing, and it seems quite hard to get really simple to use man on the street or woman on the street life cycle analyses, because we've got two community supported agricultures on Gower, one's Kaitan and one's Big Meadow. I don't know if you've heard of them. So I covered a friend who has a share, and I was driving from Upper Calais to Llangennith, so it was like a 20-minute drive every single week, and 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back. And she goes from the centre of Swansea, so she's doing a 40-minute drive there and a 40-minute drive back. And obviously you've got the embodied car wear and tear emissions in that, and also you're not getting the whole of your vegetables for the week. So you're still having to go to the supermarket. So whilst the CSA is really good, actually, overall, if you look at the life cycle analysis, is it the good thing to do, or should you just be going to the supermarket?
I'll only add some thoughts before Angelina comes in, but that's, I guess, a really complex question. So in my brain, I'm thinking, do you drive an electric vehicle? If you didn't purchase from that CSA, would you, what's the alternative? Where are you purchasing from? What, retail supplier, where do they purchase their food? How sustainable is that? We've done loads of studies on things like tomatoes, for example, where we actually found in some instances it was more sustainable to import tomatoes from elsewhere, even with the air miles, because they were produced in more suitable climatic conditions elsewhere, for example, in more sustainable ways. So there's a lot of questions within that, and you'd have to kind of look at the specifics. But yeah, Angelina, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, the only thing, exactly what you said, Shea, but also I think, this is where we can move forward in terms of community food hubs so that you can bring all of that to one central location that might be easier for people to reach. But I also saw in the comments a lot of really good comments around delivery shares and ride shares and things like that. So I know one of the veg bag schemes that I'm a part of, the members have an online WhatsApp chat group and they coordinate pickups between them so that you get maybe one person going to pick up and then dropping off to their 3 different neighbors who live in the same community as them.
Genius, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. I hope it's okay. I do want to make sure that everybody's kind of popped a question in, gets to answer it. So I know we're going a little bit over, but I hope that's okay, because I really did want to come back to you, Finn. I know you put a question in a little while back, and I thought it was really interesting. And also, I just wanted to say that I think what you're asking about is something that Tara is actually going to be covering in the 3rd webinar in the series. But if you also just wanted to ask it now, I think it would be good to get other people's perspective if you wanted to.
Hi there. Yeah, sorry, I asked the question, then cut out immediately because my Wi-Fi went down, so I do apologise. It was basically after the 2 presentations at the start, which thank you again for all of them. I've been doing a few innovation grants for the government recently. And one thing I noticed was a lot of things like the Plastic Pact and other kind of similar government policies focus large on big business. And I was just wondering if there was anything going around that focusing on small business, like the company I work with now, Our Pledge, is trying to introduce as well, as to, kind of to work towards connecting the dots up there as well, because I worry otherwise that big businesses will be getting ahead of the game really, in terms of going kind of plastic free and reducing their carbon footprint, and that a lot of businesses will be losing out.
Who would like to answer on that one? Brian, Bettina?
Can I pitch in there for just a sec?
Yeah, of course.
So UK Plastics Pack is delivered by RA. And the reason why we focus on big businesses is because their footprint is, they're the massive consumers and they're so influencing. And if you can get big businesses to change, then often that drives change throughout the supply chain and reaches those smaller businesses. So that's number one. They also pay to participate in those agreements. And so, it would be difficult to ask a small business to participate, but all of the resources and all the guidance and the knowledge is available on our website. So we try to share that best practice, and also smaller businesses can also, you can actually, engage with PACT without having to be a member. Yeah, for example, and we try to do that with a lot of our agreements, our voluntary agreements. And so you can still, share the learnings and share the best practice. But that's RAP's approach, and that's how we work. And there probably are lots of other organizations that also provide that support in Wales for the smaller businesses. I know Business Wales tries to do that, but that's why RAP takes that approach. And I would encourage you to go use the resources, use the tools, use the guidance from PACT or Courtauld or any of our agreements. Yeah.
I hope that's helpful, Finn.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's merely my not my business, but my boss I've just started. We run a crowdfunding for to help smaller businesses look at more sustainable alternatives. So we do market research for them originally, to work out if, and then get people to pre-pledge money in advance, so that the business already knows that their market is already there and that they have the kind of financial support to be able to kind of start that off. She should be here next week.
Okay. I mean, thank you so much for coming this evening. I have to say, I think, like I said, my the Vice Chair of Sustainable Wales, Tara, is going to be hosting the 3rd one, and I think that she'd be absolutely delighted if you could as well come along to that one, because I think that's going to be a really interesting talk, and we'll cover so much of that.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be great for you to just say Finn, what you do and what you can do for small businesses, because I think there is a gap there. I agree that there is a level of support mostly that they don't actually know about, and it's how do we get those messages through to help them. And I've worked with startups more recently, and again it's about how can they start up in sustainably designing out waste for their products from day one, and it's where can we find that wrap of support to help both startups and SMEs progress, and because it's not going to be that it's not their first priority. Usually is how do we enable the support that we can bring in and take out as they can afford it, and as they can need to expand their mind, their thinking on these things. So yeah, it'd be great to see you there, so thank you.
Can I just, sorry, I don't want
yeah, of course, no, you go,
just like to add what Tara said, but I did an awful lot of work in Scotland with social enterprises who are identifying opportunities within the circular economy to establish businesses. So you got all manner of businesses setting up, like a company collecting golf equipment and reselling it and sharing it, a company collecting babies' clothes and recirculating it, a whole range of social enterprises developing, coming up with new ideas to satisfy the circular economy and find new markets. Fascinating stuff out there, quite magical, to be quite honest.
Brilliant. Well, I've obviously we did call these lightning webinars. I've tried my best to keep us to 7:45, and I just want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers this evening for being here and giving your time and helping us as a charity to be able to pull this together. I just wanted to, before I wrap up, I just wanted to say, just looking at some of the comments, the chat box has been absolutely delightful this evening. We've had a long quote from Helen, from Terry Pratchett. Sarah's cat has also joined us. And I just wanted to say, Matthew Jones, agreed with you, Bettina and Shea, about, there've been so many projects. I really do feel that in putting these webinars together, I've had so many people who have given their time, and it's such a huge area. But what I've found with talking to people is that so many people have had some project or more than one project over decades that they've been involved in, and for some reason it didn't go any further, for various different reasons. So I feel very, fortunate that there are so many people out there who are so experienced in this, and the fact is, like, we are running out of time, and I know we hear this all the time, but 2050 is the target for zero waste, and we have to hit it. And I hope that through this tonight we've really kind of helped answer the question of why we have to have a circular economy. And just to go over it, it is hugely because of sustainable development, sustainability, which is at the heart of Sustainable Wales. But it's also shown tonight, it's jobs, you save money, it's for health, it's for localism, and it's also really for social justice too. So like I said, thank you all so much for coming this evening. This is the first in the series of 4. Next week, because I've got to say, whenever it's kind of like, I feel now like, right, I get it, it's important, it's going to be joined up, we've all got to kind of like pull together. But next week, coming back to what Gabriella was saying earlier on, really, we're going to have a little bit of a look at what can we do at the moment, what things are out there at the moment that we can kind of make a difference with. And as you said, how accessible is that at the moment? How can we make it more accessible? So Helen is going to be speaking next week about fashion. We've got somebody talking to us about zero carbon homes. We're going to be talking about the financial aspect. We've got somebody telling us how they got on actually trying to live totally zero waste and if they made it. So I hope you can join us. If you've enjoyed it tonight, please share, please get people to come to our next ones. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And we're going to put the recording up afterwards as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Almost a lightning. Bye.